Law of sines, we are on this second case, side-side angle. In our previous video, we talked about how careful we have to be with these kinds of triangles because I can end up with three different scenarios. I might end up with a triangle that doesn't exist, like what happened in the previous example, in the previous video. I can also end up with a triangle that just fits, okay? Exactly one triangle will exist with the given measures, and I can also end up with a triangle with measurements that will fit two different triangles, okay? Ambiguous case. So we're going to do an example now with the given information. It says that triangle, let me change this, triangle ABC has the given information. A is equal to 13, B is equal to 8, and the measure of angle A is equal to 45 degrees. That's the information that's given. So I'm going to grab a triangle and let's label it. And once we're done labeling it, we'll analyze what we can do. I'm going to start with A here. A, B, C. A is 13, that means this side is 13. B is 8, this side is 8. And the measure of angle A is 45. Okay, notice we have side, side, angle. Now let's go ahead and use the law of sines to figure out what these measurements are. So I'm going to go ahead, since I have A and angle A, I can use A sine of A equal. The other thing I have is side B. So B sine of B, and that way I can try and solve for angle B. So let's fill in the information. A is 13, and sine of A is sine of 45, equals B. B is 8, sine of B, which is what I'm looking for. Now let's solve for sine of B. We're going to cross multiply this way and cross multiply that way. So on this side, I end up with 13 times the sine of B. On the other side, I end up with 8 times the sine of 45. Now I have to isolate sine of B. That means I divide by 13 on both sides. This cancels out. So sine of B equals 8 times the sine of 45 divided by 13. Okay? Sine of B is equal to 0.4351. And this is our first stop. This is where I stop and you be careful, okay? Remember in our previous video, the sine of the angle was a value greater than 1, and that told us this triangle doesn't exist. In this case, I stop and check. Is the sine of this angle greater than 1? It's not. It's less than 1. That means this is okay. Now remember, sine of B has to be in between -1 and 1, and this number is between -1 and 1. So we are okay. That tells me that this triangle will exist. Now, what is the angle B? The measurement of angle B is equal to the inverse sine of 0.4351, and in your calculator, in degree mode, the measure of angle B equals 25.79 degrees. And this is our second stop. Here, be careful. And I'm going to go off to the side to explain a little bit here about this angle. Let me change colors. Now, this is what you have to be careful about. We have a supplementary. I'm going to write it here. We have a supplementary supplementary angle identity. And this is what the identity says. It says that the sine of an angle is the same thing as the sine of 180 minus that angle. What does that mean? For example, sine of 30 degrees is going to be equal to sine of 180 minus 30. That means that the sine of 30 degrees is equal to the sine of 150 degrees. Now, if you don't believe this, go ahead in your calculator. Look for the sine of 30. You will get 0.5. And look for the sine of 150. You will also get 0.5. So what this identity tells you is that whenever you get an angle using sine inverse, that value for the angle, you will always get the acute angle, or the angle that's in between 0 and 90 degrees, okay? But there's also a mirror or a reflection of this angle in the second quadrant. If I draw my 4 quadrants here for sine, 25.79 degrees, well, let's use 30, since we know 30 from the unit circle. 30 degrees would be about here. The sine for 30, remember, is 1/2. That's your y coordinate. And we also have an angle on this second quadrant whose sine is also 1/2, right? And what angle is that? Well, it's 150, because if I measure this angle here from the x-axis, this measures 30, and this little piece here will also be 30. So this whole angle all the way to here would be 180 minus 30, which is 150. So 150 degrees will have the same sine as 30 degrees. So I have to be aware of that, because now this is what you do. Since you know that another angle has the same sine as that 30 degrees, then you need to decide if this triangle has the angle you looked for, or if it has the other angle, the supplement of this angle. Okay, this is what I mean. I calculated an angle of 25.79. Okay, so now I need to check for the other angle whose sine is also 0.4351. This is what I mean. Using this identity, I can say that the sine of 25.79 is equal to the sine of 180 minus 25.79. Okay, so that means if I take the sine of this angle and I take the sine of this subtraction, which will give you 154.21, if you take the sine of 25.79, you will get 0.4351. If you take the sine of 154.21 degrees, you will also get 0.4351. You can check this in your calculator. So what this tells me is that the measure of angle B can be 25.79, or it can also be 154.21, because I get the same sign for both. Okay, so you have to be aware of that. Now, which of the two is it? How do I choose? How do I know which of these two angles is the correct angle for this triangle? It's very simple. This is what you do. You take the one you calculated and you add it to 45. Okay, so let's do that. You're going to say, well, 45, which is the given angle, plus 25.79, this value has to be less than 180 degrees. Does that make sense? It should, because if this is 45 and angle B is 25, it should be less than 180 because I still have one more angle to add, okay? So you can easily, without having to add them, you can see that this is 70 something. So we're good. That means angle B can very highly be 25.79. Now, let's check this other angle. You're going to take the given angle plus 154.21, and this sum should also be less than 180. Now, what happens here when I add 154 and 45, I'm way over 180. That tells me that this cannot be the angle for angle B. So there's no other choice. The measure of angle B has to be 25.79. Final answer for B, okay? And now that we are definitely sure that this is the angle for angle B, I can go ahead and finish solving this triangle. So I can go ahead and say this is definitely 25.79 degrees. Once I know these two angles, I can find the measure of angle C. Measure of angle C will be 180 minus 45 plus 25.79. So the measure of angle C is equal to 109.21 degrees. There you have angle C. Now what's left in this triangle to solve? I still have to find, this is 109.21, I still have to find side C. So to find side C, you just simply say C sine of C equals, and let's use A sine of A. I always like to use the original values just to make it more precise. So C will be equal, if we cross multiply here, to A sine of C over sine of A. And if we substitute values, A is 13, sine of C will be the sine of 109.21 divided by the sine of 45. And C will give you, C is equal to 17.4. Okay? And there you have all your values. 17.4. So go back, hit rewind, try and do this problem on your own. Remember to make all the necessary steps to check and make sure that everything is correct. And then check your answer against the answer in this video to make sure that you've got this.